dias from outside the Cuban embassy here in Bogota, Colombia, where there is, I believe, a libertarian gathering, a gathering of libertarians protesting against Cuba.
Against
Cuba
the
regime.
Castro cartel.
Okay, so
We
let's
are here
let's
complaining.
let's find out exactly why you're here.
We are here complaining about the Castro cartel, mafiosos in Cuba for 60 years. Only one family in power. The rest are slaves. It's an island full of slaves of one single family for 60 years. No more dictatorship.
Okay, so how is the Castro family impacting life here in Colombia?
Well, actually, we're here today because at the beginning of this year.
And can you introduce yourself?
Yeah,
You're the
hi
leader of the
everyone.
movement, right?
I'm Maria Alejandra Londoño. I'm the leader of the libertarian movement here in Colombia. This is the third protest that we do this year. At the beginning of the year, the ELN, a very well-known guerrilla here in Colombia, they put a bomb at a Escuela General Santander, and they killed 22 young
This was-
students. Young students.
What
This was
kind of
this year.
school was this?
Military school. This was a
Police
military
school.
school, a police school, and it was perpetrated by the ELN. And the ELN is right now in Cuba being protected by the regime Castro. So today we're standing up and telling the world, Cuba needs to leave Colombia. Colombia needs to break diplomatic relations with Cuba. Because
Yeah.
Cuba, it's only bringing violence. It's only bringing
Poverty.
death to not only Colombia but to Latin America. That's why we also here with the libertarian movement of Venezuela, standing up for Venezuela and for all the Cubans that had died, that had suffered under the regime of the Castro. That's why.
Yeah.
Are there any
For
other
liberty.
examples of violence here that's been sponsored, according to you, by the Castro regime? Or
Yeah,
We
50,
truly believe.
50 years of FARC, 50 years of guerrillas killing innocent people on the streets, and the guerrillas in Colombia are no guerrillas. The guerrillas in Colombia are narco dealers. Cocaine is the money of Cuba.
That's correct. The regime, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara, they sponsor guerrillas. This is why today we have this problem with guerrillas nowadays. And all the violence that you see every day perpetrated by the guerrillas is sponsored by the regime, and they're being protected by the regime. That's why we're here. So
this might be news to the international audience who might be thinking, well, things have changed, time has changed in Colombia, and you don't have narco guerrillas wandering around the streets. That's not the case.
yeah, that's not the case. That's not the
They
case.
are not wandering on the streets anymore. They now own the country. They don't have to wander on the streets. They own the country.
Yeah, that's true.
Our president Duque doesn't have what it needs to be a governor here in Colombia.
How so? How does the
How so?
Cuban
Because
regime own the
he's
country?
making deals with the Cubans again, bringing teachers to Colombia, bringing teachers to tell us how to be communist. I can't believe it.
Yeah, they change a bit the way they do this work, and actually most guerrillas are now in Venezuela, also being protected by Maduro. You don't see it wandering on the streets. Fortunately, Bogota and Medellin are very safe places now, but now they're trying to do this work underneath the table so that they don't get caught. And that's why they're being protected in Venezuela, and that's why they're in Cuba trying to do all these tragedies to destabilize the region. What is happening in Chile, what happened in Ecuador, what's happening in Venezuela, and what happened here in Colombia during November, it's all perpetrated by the same. Gracias.
Okay, so you just brought up a bunch of countries in the region.
Yeah.
So, for instance, major protest movements in other countries in the region, you think they're instigated
Yeah, by the Cuban regime. And this
in
has been
coordination
proven.
with
Yeah.
Maduro?
This has been proven. In Chile, they incarcerated Cubans, they incarcerated Venezuelans. They were defending this protest, infiltrated. Here in Colombia, also around 50 people. For Cuba, the police found them. They were infiltrated also in the protest, promoting violence, promoting destabilization in our region.
We have a commenter saying something along the lines of Colombia is going to fall under Cuban control, buoyed or like propped up by China.
Yeah.
What is
No, not
what is
really
the-
China.
I'm not saying that's the
No,
case.
no,
but
but
I mean,
China is not propping anything.
is there
It's-
any-
It's Castro family.
It's just
It's
the
the
Castro-
Castro
it's just the
family trying to lead all Latin America to be their imperio. They are imperialists. It's the Castro imperialism. That's
So-
what it is, brother.
So what about some of the people, for instance, playing devil's advocate, who say, well, let's look at what just happened in Bolivia,
Yeah.
and the so-called imperialists got their way, and Morales was ousted from power. What would be your
happened in
response
Bolivia
to
is
that?
completely different.
let
In
me-
Bolivia, people got tired of our regime, as Cubans should do, as Venezuelans should do, and they take this dictatorship out of power. It should be done, and I'm pretty sure Fidel in his grave, he's dying again because
Rolling
over because Evo left the power in Bolivia.
Si, senor. You want to say
Yes,
something?
in Bolivia, the Castro made a mistake. They allowed the people, the real people of Bolivia, to find out that they had cheated on the election polls. That's why Evo is out. And in Cuba, there are no elections. There is one party, Cuban Communist Party, and there is a constitution that only allows one party. So which kind of a country is that, where there is only one party and there is no one allowed to be on the streets giving a free speech to the people to see if they follow him in his politics? What kind of a country is that? 60 years of dictatorship, no one going to the polls. There is no other party in Cuba, and the little minority that is against the government are being incarcerated, tortured, and killed. The same way they have done for 60 years. So that is Cuba. No freedom of speech.
Well, speaking of freedom of speech, we've got a police presence here. Seems to be almost as large as the
Trenton,
protest
like
presence.
they were
So
Yeah.
what has been the
Trenton.
police response?
They are protecting us.
So
They say they are here protecting us from some vandals that come here and kick out the people that are protesting.
And
Last time-
has that happened? Has there been
Yeah.
violence?
Yes,
against-
yes.
Last time we were here around 20 days ago, and there were a lot of people pro-Cuban saying that Fidel is alive, that they were defending the regime of Cuba, and they were very violent. It was only 4 of us. Today there's more than 10 people here standing with discuss. But they were very violent. They threatened us, and after that, the indigenous guard came here because of FARC called them, supposedly to defend the Cuban embassy. So to all that people that is telling they were paranoid, that we don't know what we're doing, we're telling them there's something very shady happening here, and Cuba is responsible for that, and we're standing up for liberty, not only in Colombia, in Latin America.
For the international audience who's not familiar with FARC, could you just briefly explain what FARC is and the connection to Cuba?
FARC is a guerrilla that was sponsored by Cuba 50 years ago. Right now, a few years ago, we signed a peace treaty, a very bad peace treaty, and now they're in power. And they're a political party telling the indigenous guard to come to defend the Cuba embassy, the regime of Cuba, from pacific protests.
The
as you-
Coca
as you
Croppers.
say.
The
The
Coca
Coca
Croppers.
Club, yeah. And there have been FARC and ELN, they send money to Cuba and to Venezuela because for drugs. So this is what's going on right now.
Kyle, you want to jump in?
Well, yeah.
This is Dr. Kyle Varner, by the way, for
Hi.
those of you who don't know him.
Hi, good to be here. Yeah, FARC is a really horrible movement right now. You know, they have people who've committed rapes of young children. They have people who've committed every kind of crime against humanity possible, and they were pardoned by this so-called peace treaty, which was really an impunity process. And now they have the right to a good name, and they've actually, for example, chased a friend of mine out of Colombia for calling one of their senators a rapist, even though Carlos Lozada raped children, and yet he sits in the Colombian Senate. It's extremely shameful. And so, I'm here today to support the libertarians of Latin America as they work to rid this region of this horrible menace. And it's very interesting. The police just got out their riot shields. I'm not sure why.
We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. We are not afraid. No tenemos miedo. No tenemos miedo.
They are getting their riot shields out. I don't know why. There are no counter demonstrators. There's a group over here watching.
Oh,
but
actually, that's probably why they're here. Yeah.
I don't know if they are any idea who these people are?
No, we
the
have no
bystanders?
idea. A lot of people, they just come by and watch the protests.
I don't know. They
Some
may be
agree,
workers-
some not.
they may be
They're
workers from the construction.
And
They
by
don't look
now,
like any
I don't know, the
amenazas to
police
us,
is
no.
like preparing, like, I don't know why, because we're being very, very pacific,
Los
extremely
colo- los
pacific.
cubanos
so we don't know.
llamaron, los
We don't know.
cubanos
Yeah,
llamaron.
probably.
He says the Cubans
People in
called
the
them.
USA won't face reality, and neither will poor souls in Colombia. No fear equals death. Return the fight. Any comment on that?
Well, look, if you're libertarian, I guess you've heard of the non-aggression principle. I truly believe that the non-aggression principle is being violated here in Colombia. We're all at risk as long as the Cuba regime is still in power, and as long as Maduro is in Venezuela. Colombia is at risk, and we're just standing up. We're just speaking our truth and defending liberty in Colombia.
Are your sentiments and the sentiments of the group here quite reflective of Colombians as a whole, or
Not
is
at
it
all.
a lot different?
Not at all. We are just a few
A few
against the
of
Cubans.
you against the Cubans.
Everybody in Colombia is very wrong about what Cuba really is, because the Castro are experts on the media. They always pretend that they protect the people, but they have never done so. They have always been a nepotist family. Always in power, no one can rule but them.
So how is it that the Castro regime uses media to?
Well,
Just
please
try to
don't
go
ask
to
me.
the Castro.
Don't ask me to do that. Read a little bit of Antonio Gramsci, and you will know. And you will know why Castro is an expert on this.
Just
Because the
try-
communists are experts on, let's say, handling all the media. And let me say this: CNN, New York Times. Well, all those in the U.S. come and help us. You want us to be your friends? Come and help us. Come and help us. Don't help Castro anymore. They have plenty. Come and help the Colombian people and the Latin American people. Don't see us as your backyard anymore. Come and help us. Not anything else.
How so? How should Trump?
Look-
How should the U.S. establishment help you
They-
with
they
regard
should-
to Castro, with
they should
regard to
speak
Maduro?
about this- they should speak about these issues, because actually they're thinking like nothing's going on, that we're paranoid, and actually we're not. The fact that the police is getting ready here, I don't know for what, and that the last time there were so many violent people trying to shut us down, that tells you that there's something very wrong going on in here. And we just need more people speaking about this, asking about this issue. Try to Google Fidel Castro, and you see that most of the results are positive. And actually he has killed a lot of people, as well as Maduro. He says people in USA are themselves oppressed and cannot help themselves. How can they help you?
The
Someone's
level of
Just
oppression
speak.
that you see in the United States pales in comparison to the level of oppression you see in totalitarian dictatorships like Venezuela and Cuba. I don't think that it's intellectually responsible to even make such a comparison.
So you're engaged in some interesting foreign policy debates, which is, I guess, an issue that gets glossed over a lot. But within the libertarian community, there are a lot of people who say we're non-interventionists. Why should we get involved in Latin America or elsewhere in the world? It's just going to make things worse.
Yeah, well, that's because they've been involved in the anti-war movement, and they've made a bunch of left-wing friends, and they don't understand the true threat that Cuba, Venezuela, and El Foro de Sao Paulo represents for the region. I think it's absolutely vital that the United States use force to get rid of the Sao Paulo Forum and eradicate communism from our hemisphere. And I would finish by saying that people who cry non-interventionism when we're talking about this kind of existential threat to the lives of millions of people are cowards, and the anti-war movement is an orgy of pigs. Libertarians who get involved in the anti-war movement are bound to get themselves dirty. And I just want to give a special shout out to the most shameful man in the libertarian movement, Daniel McAdams. You are one of the most shameful Maduro supporters and shameful human beings that can exist on the planet. You bring your boss's name into disgrace, and the Ron Paul Institute should be shut down because it is a Russian propaganda outlet.
Okay, so I guess you guys are
Thank
all.
you.
I
Thank
guess
you,
you guys
brother.
are all
Thank you so much.
too familiar with Ron Paul and apparently Daniel McAdams as well.
Yeah, I do. He probably.
Which, this might be a shock to certain American libertarians that Ron Paul's reputation might be a bit tarnished abroad, but you have any comment on that?
Well, I mean,
I don't know this
you just need to get your head out of your ass sometimes and see that, yeah, of course, the priorities of a libertarian in the United States are not the same as me, the director of the libertarian movement in Colombia, because this is a threat to us. This is an actual threat. And the fact that you're saying non-intervention is actually not being non-intervention, but it's actually acknowledging that there's a problem here, that there's people dying because their freedom is being taken away, and you just want to deny of that. And I just think that's very shameful, and they should reflect on that. Like, you won't be
Denial
free. You won't be
is
free.
the tool of the
Yeah.
cartel Castro.
And you and
Denial is the tool of the cartel Castro.
none of us will be free until everyone is free. And if you think you have freedom in your country, I invite you here to Colombia or to Venezuela or to Cuba to see what it costs to lose your freedom.
Have you been to Venezuela or Cuba?
I don't think I'm allowed there anymore because of what I do here.
In the
of activism.
past?
In the past, no, I've never tried, and I don't think I'm allowed there anymore.
I wouldn't be surprised if you're
Yeah.
not, but
But we'll still here in Colombia. We have our voices, we have the networks, we have social media, and we're gonna keep fighting.
what about I don't know how many, but countless Venezuelans who poured into Colombia? What's
That's not
what's
like
their
saying
take on
millions.
the situation?
They're taking
Most of them very anti-Maduro or
Yeah,
what?
all of Venezuelans, they have left Venezuela. They're anti-Maduro, and they want their country to be free. I mean, they want to get back to their homes. They don't want to be in a strange country, away from their families, having to work on something they didn't want it to do. So they want freedom, and most of them, I think all of them, are libertarians. Many of them have showed their support to us, to the cause here for the libertarian movement in Colombia. So we've become a platform in Colombia for Cuba and for Venezuelan refugees to defend liberty.
Have Cubans come here as well?
Yeah, actually, the guy that he was speaking, he is a Cuban refugee here, and he has lost a lot because of the regime, and that's why he's here. He's from Cuba, and that's why he's here protesting with us, because he wants to get back to his country. He wants to see justice for all the families that he has lost, and for all the shit that the regime has done to him.
The man who was just speaking on
Yeah,
camera.
Luis.
Luis, you're from Cuba?
Yes, I was born in Cuba back in 57. My family came to Colombia in 61. I don't have to explain you why, because they took everything away from us. We came to Cuba from Spain, worked for years and years to make some money, and then this, I don't want to say the word, mothers, yeah? They took everything from my family and all others, and not only money or lands, they took lives from our families. They killed our families. My grandfather was 17 years in jail just because he was the father of someone that was not with Castro's. So 17 years behind bars for nothing. That is the Castro family reality. They are not communists, they are not socialists. They are a mafia taking care of an island for 60 years for them, because they don't take care of the island for the people. They take care of the island for them and their allies, like Maduro, Ortega, Evo, the Kirchners, the Lula, the Correas, and all the others that are trying to take the people's lives away to be rich, because that's all they want, be rich. See this image here? See this image here? That's the reality of the Cuba cartel. That is the reality. Thank you for this chance. Thank you for this chance, and God bless Colombia.
Any comments from the audience? I saw someone saying something about boots on the ground is the only reality. And how about, let's explain some of the signs we've got. What do these say?
Well, the sign says this is a sample of a good communist. He's got the hunger tattoo in his skin and the ignorance in his face. And the other one, I just don't have to explain it. This fellow used to call himself El Comandante en Jefe, which means commander and boss. And here we say he's the comedian and boss.
What do we have over here?
Well, this is the hashtag that we're using. This is a hashtag Fuera Cuba de Colombia. And here we're just trying to explain the inherence
Cuba
of
out
the
of-
Cuba and the photo of Sao Paulo. And we're saying no more. we need to extradite these terrorists right now. We know the ELN is being protected by the regime of Cuba, and we just want Cuba to bring them back to see justice, to have justice, and Duque needs to break diplomatic relations for Cuba. They've
So you
done
want
too
this-
much
you want
damage.
this embassy
Yeah,
out
we
of
want
here.
them out of here. We don't want the embassy Cuba here in Colombia. We want them out of here until Cuba is free.
Please, Mr. Duque, break relations with Cuba. No more diplomatic relations with Cuba. No more.
No more.
Any comments, Kyle?
Well, it's really great to be here. I've been spending most of my time in Latin America for the last.
Yeah, why? Why did you pick as an American?
Yeah,
why-
the crisis in Venezuela really touches me, and this is the closest I can get to Venezuela. I mean, I can get to the border, but I've made so many friends here in the libertarian.
60
got some action.
años
We got some
quitándonos
action.
la libertad. ¿Usted conoce Cuba?
La libertad.
La libertad que hemos tenido los colombianos de hacer patria. Yo llegué aquí exiliado a los 5 años y todo lo que tengo lo tengo
Sí,
gracias a
conozco
Colombia.
Cuba. Yo sí conozco.
¿Y qué le pasa? ¿Cuba bonita?
Sí.
La isla maravillosa.
Mentira! Can you give us a little play-by-play?
All right, so
What's
this
going
lady's
on?
coming here to argue. She says that Cuba is beautiful, and she knows Haiti, and they love people, and they love they're
De un pueblo culto como es Cuba. No se
¡Culto!
hubiera
¡Culto!
no se
¿Quién puede ir a
hubiera
una biblioteca en
déjame
Cuba?
hablar,
¿Quién
déjame
puede ir a una biblioteca en
un
Cuba a
pueblo
leer?
culto como Cuba. No se hubiera rebotado contra el sistema, no sean bobos.
Nadie tiene un arma, señora. Nadie tiene un arma.
Sí.
Nadie tiene un arma. ¿Cómo se rebota usted contra un gobierno sin armas? ¿Cómo,
El
señora?
arma la tienen acá.
Sí, pero allá
En la
tiene que
cabeza.
disparar.
Ustedes-
Allá hay que disparar
ustedes
porque
en
ellos tienen las
Estados Unidos,
armas.
Los niños de Estados Unidos se asesinan a sus compañeros, a sus amigos. Eso, en Cuba no pasa eso. Además, el que no le guste vivir en Bogotá, que se larga. Vaya para la mierda. Vaya para la mierda. Ustedes están en mi tierra. y
Nos
en mi
mataron
tierra.
21 jóvenes y allá están escondidos con ellos. Nos mató el ELN. El ELN nos mató 21 jóvenes.
Váyase a
Nos
Cuba.
mataron
Váyase a
23.
Cuba, ignorante.
Imbéciles. No sean imbéciles.
Ignorante.
Ignorante
Imbécil usted.
¿Usted de qué habla?
Váyase para
Ignorante.
Cuba.
Váyase
No. Ustedes son unos farsantes.
Váyase a
¿Cuánto
Cuba.
les pagan?
Váyase a
¿Cuánto les
Cuba.
Váyase para Cuba.
Váyase a Cuba, vendida. Sucia, ignorante.
Okay, so what is she saying?
okay, so
Her-
she's
heard her saying
basically-
something about the U.S. and
Yeah, she
friends.
said, "Oh, children in the U.S. are killing themselves every day." Cuba sobriety.
Mira, eso es el claro ejemplo de que Cuba es bueno para los que van de turistas. Y
Yeah.
eso es lo que creen.
This is a clear example of that Cuba's great for going as tourists, and that's why they believe these things.
Los
So
turistas sí disfrutan Cuba.
the tourists, yes, they enjoy Cuba. ¿Tienes algo más a decir?
No, mira, yo soy venezolano.
He says,
You're Venezuelan?
here, come
Yo
to the
soy-
camera. He says, I'm a Venezuelan.
Yo soy venezolano. Y estoy aquí apoyando la lucha de los hermanos colombianos porque
and
Cuba se metió en todos los países de la región y no trae nada bueno.
I'm Venezuelan and I'm here supporting my Colombian brothers because Cuba is putting their affairs, or their nose into the affairs of all of us in Venezuela and also in Colombia.
Todo lo que trae es injerencismo. O sea, ellos se meten en los países y lo único que traen es desestabilización, narcotráfico y promoción de grupos terroristas.
So the only thing that Cuba brings when they put their nose in a country is narco trafficking and the ¿qué dijiste más?
Que
Que traen
promueven-
narcotráfico,
desestabilización y
instability,
promueven grupos terroristas.
and they promote terrorist groups.
De hecho, el ELN, que es el grupo terrorista que apoyó a la FARC, que apoyó Cuba para crear, está en Venezuela, apadrinado por Maduro. En este sentido tengo mucho que decir, o sea, yo puedo decir demasiado porque soy venezolano, estoy aquí por algo. Si no,
Yeah.
esos tipos no estuvieran allá, yo no estaría aquí en
He
Cuba.
says if the Cubans weren't in Venezuela, I wouldn't have to be here in Colombia.
Okay, so so the pro-Cuba lady is still here. We're battling a little sun, but she's standing right outside the embassy, and now the libertarians are chanting at her.
Cuba.
Váyase para Cuba, vaya para Cuba, vaya. ¿Cuánto le costó? Mírese en esta imagen, mírese aquí, usted está aquí en esta imagen, mírese a sí misma, mírese.
Provocador es darle refugio a los asesinos de 21 jóvenes en la Escuela General Santander. Eso es provocador. Darle refugio a los terroristas.
Asesinos en una escuela estudiando.
We're going to end up leaving here in just a couple minutes, but I want to thank you for coming.
Could we get the Venezuelan guy back on for one
Absolutely.
second?
Hey, ven para acá. Él tiene unas preguntas más para ti.
Más about the situation in Venezuela.
About what?
Why did you come here?
¿Por qué
exactly?
viniste por acá a Colombia? ¿Por qué dejaste Venezuela?
Yo tuve que dejar mi país para buscar más, o sea, para buscar la calidad de vida. O sea, ya yo soy
I
abogado,
had to
yo soy
leave
abogado.
my country to look for quality of life. I'm a lawyer.
Y allá no podía ganar ni siquiera, o sea, el sueldo mínimo.
I couldn't even earn the minimum wage in Venezuela.
Era prácticamente 1 libra de carne mensual.
The minimum wage is basically a pound of meat monthly.
Y también participé en la resistencia,
And I participated in the resistance,
así que tuve que escapar por temas de seguridad.
and I had to escape for the reasons of security.
So what would the regime do to you because you're resisting Maduro?
¿Qué te haría el régimen porque estás
¿Qué
en
me haría,
contra?
qué me haría o qué me hizo?
Ambos. He said, what would they do or what have they done?
Both.
Both.
Bueno,
both.
a mí personalmente fui uno de los pocos que pudo escapar, o sea, sin mayores daños, pero a mis amigos los persiguieron,
I was one of the few who could escape without a lot of danger. But to my friends, they persecuted.
fueron encarcelados,
They were
torturados,
incarcerated, tortured.
les abrieron procesos
They-
judiciales
they-
en tribunales militares siendo civiles,
They brought them into military criminal proceedings.
y un largo etcétera que si me pongo a hablar pues duro todo el día
and a
acá.
large etc. that if I start talking about, we could be here all day.
O sea, básicamente estoy acá porque necesito vivir.
Basically, I'm here because I need to live.
Uno sale del país buscando libertad. O sea, puede ser que sea el país vecino, pero uno busca libertad, que es lo básico que uno necesita para vivir. Trabajar, poder comprarte el sustento, o sea, poder obtener el sustento, todo eso.
Yeah, I can find work here, I can live here, I can eat here, and all of this is necessary.
Básicamente eso es lo que hago acá. Pero
Basically, this is
y
what I'm
acá
doing here.
vi la convocatoria de los hermanos colombianos y me parecía que tenemos todo para hacer una lucha en común. Así que acá estoy apoyando.
I saw the stuff that my Colombian brothers are posting, and I think that we have a fight that's completely in common. That's why I'm here.
Muchas gracias, señor.
A tu orden, que estés muy bien.
Thank you. Well, thank you.
Thank
for coming,
you for the
Josh.
translation.
You're welcome.
Any last comments, Kyle?
Well, you know, everything I do, I'm doing because these are such amazing people confronting things that we have.
By the way, the commenter just said what wonderful people here in
Yeah,
Colombia.
they are wonderful people, and they're confronting risks and dangers that we as Americans never face. We're packing up right now because we believe if we stay, there's going to be some violence, and you know, that just doesn't really happen in the United States.
There are now some people poking their head.
Yeah.
The lady went inside.
The lady went inside
Yes,
the embassy.
yes, some passerby.
So yeah, some passerby, they sent her here, and she was calling more people. I bet the same people that last time were here trying to harass us and being violent with us.
So
We're
for
very
the audience, the lady who was arguing right over here just ducked inside the gate of the embassy. I can't tell if she's now inside the actual building. No, she's standing outside. Someone saying pretty much sums up live and survive corrupt system. Yeah, so you can probably see the lady is now inside the embassy property, or within the embassy property, and there are people staring at me in coats. Yeah, a bunch of people just came out of the building and are standing on the grounds of the embassy, looking out at myself and the protesters. So, what do you think? You think she's
so
embassy personnel or a provocateur? Or...
I think that she's one of their friends. She may be on their payroll or she may not, but she walked in from the street, she cursed at us, and then of course she walked into the embassy. They don't let just somebody walk in from the street into the embassy like that. And she's on the phone calling
now
other people.
Coming out.
most of them were coming with the embassy. All the people from the embassy keep coming in and out, taking pictures of us. But the lady that was just here, she was like cursing at us, saying that we were paid from the empire. And then she got just after we went in the embassy. So I think, yeah, she may be some friend of the embassy.
Yeah, that's the kind of things that happens here. You know, there are spies, there are provocateurs, and there's always this really heightened threat of violence. Fighting for liberty in Latin America is just a different fight than it is in the United States. And I just love my libertarian brothers and sisters all over Latin America who are risking more than I ever will and working harder than I ever will. And I am committed to doing everything I can to support them. And that's why I've been spending the majority of my time in Latin America. The fight is not just in Venezuela, it's in Cuba, it's in Mexico, it's in Argentina, it's in Ecuador, where I just got back from. It's still in Bolivia, although we've had major successes in Bolivia. And the fight for liberty goes on. But I want to, once again, special shout out to the American libertarians who are supporting Nicolas Maduro and Evo Morales. You guys are some of the most shameful pigs I can imagine.
You want to end it on a confrontational note, but
Absolutely.
no problem. I'm just here to broadcast. It's kind of interesting how I see no counter protesters, yet we have an increasing police presence, and some of them, well, one of them looks like she's dressed in riot gear. So I don't know, maybe if this crowd, if the libertarians stick out here significantly longer, then maybe there will be some action or violence beyond what we've already seen. Anyone who's watching have any last comments or questions? This protest is wrapping up. I am sorry, trying not to block the lens. It's in Hong Kong, it's in Europe, it's in America, it's in Africa, etc. Well, it doesn't seem like this crowd is very reflective of the overall sentiments in Colombia, as I think Maria was explaining. Someone was explaining that the libertarians here outside the Cuban embassy are very much the minority, or so it seems. So I don't know if this is comparable to, say, Hong Kong, but yeah, it's been a very interesting year full of protests all around the world. I don't see any action. I do see that crowd. Maybe you can make them out from across the street, maybe not. That crowd that came out of the embassy building is still standing outside the building on the embassy grounds. I don't know what happened to that woman. And yeah, there were one or two people popping in and out of the embassy, including the woman, over the past 30 minutes or so since I've been here. This has been an interesting first coverage of protest action in Latin America for me. And I hope you all who have tuned in Paris, yeah, I mean, there have been huge protests going on. Yeah, we have a comment.
So we need to get going because we need to leave now before police maybe do a move on us. And we've been here for 2 hours. Thank you so much for coming, for supporting this cause. Thank you so much to all the people that is watching. And I invite you to follow the libertarian movement, Movimiento Libertario Colombia, and to support us. Any little bit help, every little help, everything you can send us is gonna do a major change. And if you're interested in knowing more, you can follow me also on social media, Maria Alejandra Londoño at Maria Ale Londo. So thank you so much.
If you give me a link, I can stick that in
yeah,
the
of course.
description
I'll
below
send you the
after the stream.
Yeah.
But
Thanks so much.
muchas gracias for providing some insights into what's going on here, and good luck with your movement.
Thank you so much for coming. Bye everyone. Thank you.
All right, then I guess it's time for me to wrap things up, because it doesn't look like there's going to be a physical confrontation between the police and the protesters, although maybe that would occur if this were to go on for a few more minutes. But hope you all got something out of this broadcast, and I hope to be doing more broadcasting from Latin America live on the ground, and we'll see what happens in the weeks to come. So muchas gracias and hasta luego from outside the Cuban embassy here in Bogota.